So you've signed a purchase and sale agreement, or a PSA as we call it. Now what? Part 2. So again, Brian Bornhorst was with you last week. He was covering for me as I was out of town and had something come up and could not get to it. Actually, I had a really bad internet connection where I was at and couldn't get to it. So I appreciate Brian jumping in. Brian is our asset manager. So he is actually doing what we're going to be talking about right now while we're talking. He is in the market looking at a deal we just put under contract, doing the things that we're about to talk about today. So thanks again for that, and hope you you enjoyed that content that he provided. So we want to go over, I know that Brian went over, what is a property condition assessment? So I didn't watch his webinar. There may be a little bit of overlap. I'll try not to spend too much time. I believe he got through the first 2 points, but I do want to make sure that we, cover everything in its fullest. So let's see. All right. Right now I have a purchase and sale, or a PCA, property condition assessment form up. Can everybody see that? Just put it in the chat. Yes, if you can see that. Yes. All right. Excellent. All right. So, and if Brian showed you this, again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time. Property condition assessment is a report done by the lender. Actually, right 1 minute before this webinar started, I sent an email to our lender on this new deal, setting up the date for our PCA and our phase 1 on this new property. And so they're getting that set up with the broker, and they are getting that done. So PCA is an inspection done by the lender, and they want to make sure that what kind of condition the property is in. So a lot of people wonder, what type of inspections do you need to have done after you purchase a property? This covers a wide range of things. I think you still need to have your own individual contractors take a look at some specific items, which we'll get into in a minute. But the property condition assessment, again, I apologize if there's some redundancy, but bear with me. So executive summary, this is kind of going over just what they found. I'm just going to go over the kind of the table of contents. Cost estimates on things that they found that need to be fixed. And a lot of times they'll actually escrow the money out from the beginning. So this can be problematic sometimes if you don't have enough cash underwritten or reserve of capital underwritten in your deal when you go into it. So let's say you had operating reserves and you had Capex. And then the PCA gets done and they say, well, the roofs need to be replaced. And so we're going to escrow, we're going to pull back $250,000 of capital until you get the roofs replaced. And if you didn't know that the new roofs needed to be replaced and you hadn't underwritten to replace those, and you had $250,000 allotted to do whatever, that money is now gone. You don't have it to use on what you needed to use it on until you get the roofs replaced, which you also didn't have a Capex budget for. So I know that sounds a little bit complicated, but that is something that happens. Another thing that they'll mention is, or if you have radon issues, you may have to, they may escrow money to get a ventilation system put in. If you have alligator cracking on your parking lot, they may escrow $70,000 to patch the sections outlined in the PCA, and you'll have to repair those, and then you'll have to submit photos. Sometimes they'll send an inspector back out to make sure you did those items in order to release the escrow. And it's not an easy process. I will tell you that right now. They're not in the business to make it easy for you. They're in the business to make sure that the money that they have lent out is being used properly, and that the property that they are on the line for is up to standard. So these are non-recourse loans. So the lender's underwriting the property and the property value. So they want to make sure that there's no life safety issues or, anything like the roof replacement. So if there is a default, let's say, the operators are not able to maintain the property and the bank has to take over ownership, they want to make sure that they have the money necessary to repair the things that they have outlined in the PCA. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. The chat box gets a little bit hard to track those. So if you put them in the Q&A, then we can go ahead and get that taken care of. And I'll just keep going down through. So those were the immediate repair items and replacement repair items. Property characteristics, just is talking about what it's built out of, wood frames, concrete construction, the different mechanical, electrical, plumbing components, whether it's gas or electric, or, what type of water heaters, what type of heat units they have, any type of moisture barriers, pest management. So if you're spraying for bugs, is there a termite bond? Things like that is what they're looking for. You see the different things, special hazards, peak ground acceleration. So any type of water runoff or flood zones they're looking for all those types of things. So, these are good things to look for when you're looking at a property and you're on site for the tour to look. I know a lot of you probably won't know what you're looking for on these types of things. But as you get into the business and as you do it, you will learn more and more. Zoning, make sure everything is good as far as zoning is concerned. There's no zoning violations, if you will. That all of the fire equipment is up to date. All the inspections are signed off on, and regulatory compliance in those regards. Any access or NADA, different things. And then areas of additional assessment, known problematic building materials. So if there's something in the property that's known, let's say there's aluminum wiring, which is known to be a problem, they'll note it here. There is aluminum wiring, and then there'll be a solution to that. You're going to have to do this to correct this. And a lot of that's going to probably be based on the insurance company. They're going to want you to pigtail the aluminum wires so that there's not any arcing issues, which is what the problem is with aluminum. And so on and so forth. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. There's going to be photos to back this up, location map and everything of where the items were that they outlined. And then they're going to talk about who the person was that was on site and why are they qualified to tell me what I need to do on my property. So there will be some qualifications there. And energy performance, if required, if you're going for like a green loan to cut down some interest rates. So yeah, my camera keeps stopping, so I apologize about that. I'm not sure why, it just keeps cutting off. So bear with me if that happens, just shoot me a note, but thank you, Melissa, for that. So that's a basic PCA, this is what it looks like. This is on a property. I'm not going to spend forever going through this because it's ad nauseum. So, but I'm just going to scroll down through and kind of give you an idea of what it looks like, so you kind of have an idea. And again, this is on an actual, so see life safety items, critical items, deferred maintenance. And so this is a good property. And these are types of things that you'll see. And then we'll go down, let me see. And you'll see some photographs, and they'll kind of talk about different things that they noticed. You see the construction type. And so that's your basic PCA, property condition assessment, that's going to occur during due diligence. Okay. So I'm going to stop share for a second. All right. So if we have any questions on that, the PCA, please feel free to go ahead and give me those. Property condition assessment. What is a property condition assessment? That's what it is. How much does the lender charge for this report? That's going to vary. And, if I said a number, I would be misspeaking because I don't order those. Danny is the one that orders those. It's in the, these reports are going to be in the $1,000 range, somewhere along there. So don't quote me on that, but that's all going to be included in your closing costs, if you will. So that's all part of that lender closing cost there. And it's just standard procedure. All right. So what is a property condition assessment? That was a basic outline, is just that property condition assessment by the lender. So why then do we need to do any other type of inspection? If they're inspecting all of that and you saw that list, it's pretty extensive. Why do we need to go and check that out? Well, it depends on your strategy with the property and what your value add program is. So I'm trying to think of a way to a good illustration of this. For instance, a lot of times I will try to file insurance claims for storm damage on the property before we purchase the property, because once we purchase the property, any storm damage that's on the roof is no longer covered because it occurred prior to our policy period. Now, and then I have to wait for another storm to occur to associate that storm damage that I found during the inspection to a storm that occurred during my policy period in order for it to be covered. So what I want to do is inspect the roofs during due diligence, check for any storm damage, and then I'm going to request that the seller file an insurance claim. That request the seller file an insurance claim against their policy to have the roofs replaced. And the next question is going to be, will they do that? Yes, they will. We've done it before. Typically what you're going to do is cover their deductible. So, on a large properties, say it's $350,000 to replace the roofs. If I can get all the roofs replaced for a deductible of $10,000, I'm certainly going to do that. Now, the property condition assessment, the PCA is not going to get in that type of detail. They're not going to climb up on the roofs. They don't have a lift out there. They're not going to mark out 10 by 10 squares, 100 square foot sections and count the hail hits in that 100 square foot section, which is what you need to do to file an insurance claim. So we will get a roofing company to come out on every single property and inspect the roofs for hail damage, even on new properties. We had the PCA that I showed you was our property in Lake Norman area. It was fairly new, but we still had it checked out just to make sure. And we also have this roofer check for any warranty issues. So if it's fairly new, they may have installed the roofs incorrectly. So we want to note that, take photos of that during our due diligence. So we know if we're going to run into any leak issues, then we know we can go back on the original contractor and the subcontractor, the roofer that installed them. So it's good to make sure you're doing that. And other things you want to check for, depending on your, Capex. So, the PCA is just looking for any type of problems, but you're looking maybe for, if you want to put a dog park in, is the drainage good for that? So you're inspecting those types of things. So you want to have your contractors there. Right now for the property we are doing due diligence on, currently we have our asset manager there. We have our proposed contractors that are putting in bids there as well during due diligence, actually looking at the vacant units, looking at the Capex on the exterior to see what the vision is and get bids on those so we can make sure that our business plan is accurate. So those are types of inspections that we do during the due diligence that are going to go above and beyond what the PCA does. Okay, so let me look at our questions. Table of contents and report slides. I'm not sure that I can release that just because it's associated with a property that we currently own. And so I'm not sure that I'll be able to do that. And I'll look into that. And so I apologize, I don't have an answer on that right now. I know a couple of you have asked for that. And I did have one question. Do we lend in all 50 states for Rehab Wallet? Currently, we're focused more on the Southeast just because that's where our footprint is. So we don't really get too far, out West. We're willing to, look at specific situations if you're interested in that. And then do I schedule multiple contractors to come at the same time? So I don't want, let's see, if I'm having 3 contractors bid on putting in a dog park, I don't want all 3 of them there at the same time. It's just bad business practice. So I'll offset those meetings. And I don't want them to, I want to have separate conversations. That if you have them all there at the same time, you're going to end up with very similar bids and not really get a good idea of where you fall in the price range. So when you get bids, you're going to want to get 3 bids. And the first thing you're going to check is scope of work. Make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So this company is way cheaper, but they're using chain link instead of vinyl privacy fence or whatever. You got to make sure the scope of work is correct, and then check your pricing on that. And then you want to usually throw out your high and your low once the scope of work is evened out. Hope that answers that question. All right, so on to the next one. Real property due diligence, phase 1, title and survey. I know Brian went over this topic, but I want to just go over it again. Real property due diligence, phase 1. Does anybody have any questions on what phase 1 is? It is an environmental ground study. Make sure there's no contamination in the ground from any source on the property in question. So the problem with this can be, we had a property in Greenville. There was no issues with the property itself, but there was a dry cleaner next door. It wasn't even part of the property. And it wouldn't even have been our problem if there was contamination, but they wanted to go ahead and do a phase 2. They want to go next round. So it delayed, and it cost like $20,000 to get this report done. All clean, no issues, and who gets to pay for that? We do. So it's just part of, you got to be prepared for things like that. And so phase 1 is just the first level of that. It's not really intrusive. There's no, it's a non-destructive inspection is what we call it. So they're not having to take anything apart or tear anything apart to get to or to conduct the inspection. So radon is a part of that. And then ground contamination. So that is basically the phase 1. The title is going to make sure that the ownership of the property is correct. So your title insurance and title company are going to make sure that everything is correct. Okay, that's the title. You're verifying that who owns the property is who owns the property, and there's not somebody way on down the line that had rights to that property and you have built on something that they have rights to, and there's no issues there. So, and then survey is making sure the boundaries of the property are correct and make sure, again, that you're not building onto somebody else's titled property. So, who owns the property is who owns the property, and the borders of the property are the borders of the property. So that is survey. So typically when we do, many of you are familiar with the term hard money or non-refundable earnest money. It's when we're going to put a property under contract and we're trying to set ourselves apart and be a little bit more aggressive. We'll say, okay, we're going to put non-refundable hard money on day 1. So in other words, as soon as you sign the PSA, purchase and sale agreement, we're going to wire you whatever that is, $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, whatever that is, non-refundable. What we're usually make that contingent on is the phase 1 title and survey. Because those are big ones, right? If I, put $500,000 hard money down and then find out there's heavy chemical contamination, then that's going to be an issue with purchasing the property, and I'm going to be out that money. Same with title and survey. The other items that we are not making contingent to the hard money is any kind of deferred maintenance or, let's say there's, we find leaky pipe in one of the apartments. We have taken into consideration any unknowns with our operating reserves and with our CapEx reserves. And so that's why we make phase 1 title and survey a contingency for any hard money. The other thing that will make a contingency of the hard money is if the seller decides seller default. So if they're in the middle of it and they just, you signed the contract, you wired the money, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to sell it anymore. Well, you said non-refundable earnest money, not contingent on anything. Technically they could try to get your money. I'm sure you could win that battle in court, but who wants to fight that? So we make it contingent on seller default as well. So any questions on real property due diligence, phase 1, title and survey real quick? I know I want to get through a lot more content. All right. So should you walk every unit and check every lease? Let me go back to my screen share too, so you can kind of see what I'm looking at here. Apologize, I didn't have that up. Okay. So should you walk every unit and check every lease? Yes, always. Every time, always, yes. And you will, through COVID, there was a little bit of question on whether you could do that or not. We had some groups like, oh, you can only inspect 25%. That's a non-negotiable. I'm going to request 100%. And if there's somebody in the community, a resident that is not comfortable with someone entering their apartment, then we will have maintenance enter the apartment and have them take photos of things that we want photos taken of. That's just the way it's going to go, because we need to know what we're dealing with, and 25% of a property is not significant. So typically what we'll do is we'll have 2 or 3 walk teams. So we'll have 2 people per team, and then they'll be accompanied by one of the sellers, management teams, maintenance or staff that'll be going with them with keys. So there'll be 3 people then, 1 from the seller and 2 from the buyer, management teams that are going into each property. or each unit, and checking things out. So they're checking, the age of the water heater. Are there any leaks? Age of the HVAC units. Are there any leaks? Are they changing the filter? Is that mechanical closet locked? What's the condition of the carpet? Am I going to have to replace the carpet in unit 5B, or is it really good shape? So in other words, that helps us decide when some things are coming up for renewal and we're doing a value add program, which ones we need to focus in on first. And then, so they're listing, or they're broken, anything broken in the apartment, anything like that, they're listing through the walkthroughs. And want to make sure that the rent roll matches the physical occupancy. So, if unit 5B says it's occupied and it's on the rent roll, and you go in 5B and it's empty, you're probably going to have a question about why it's showing as leased. And, maybe they just moved out yesterday and your financials were from, a week before. So, but that's why it's important to walk every single unit. And don't, we've had pushback on that, and I'm just like, no, we want 100%. And if you have a handful, 5 people that don't want us to come in, then we'll have maintenance come in and do our inspections for us. And check every lease. Yes, most definitely check every lease. You're going to find out there's some discrepancies in leases. So, let's say rent roll says that they're paying $1,200 a month, and they you get into the lease and they're sign up for $1,250. Is there a concession there? And, we didn't know about it. What's going on? Or especially on the deposit side of things. So security deposit, you're on the hook for security deposit. So if it says in the lease that they were supposed to pay a $750 deposit, but on the financials, there's only a $600 deposit, you're on the hook for $150 somewhere. You've got to find out where that $150 went. Because it's in the lease. That's the agreement that was signed by the resident. So it's very important to check every single lease. It's also important because you're going to see where the seller's approving people to get in the property that weren't qualified. Maybe their credit wasn't good enough. Maybe they had a criminal background history and they should not have been allowed to live in the property. But believe it or not, people are getting ready to sell a property. They want to boost their occupancy, and they may allow people to come in that aren't really qualified, and you may be having to deal with them as the future owner of the property. So you definitely want to look at every single lease. So any questions on that part? I see nothing in the Q&A, so good. Hopefully I'm covering everything for you. All right, so what does retrading a deal mean? Retrading a deal is when you find something of a nature that you are not able to take into account and you want to renegotiate the purchase price. Let's say your phase 1 comes back as contaminated, and that wasn't disclosed to you. The phase 1 that you received didn't have it there. You didn't receive a phase 1, a recent phase 1 from the seller. And you're going to have to do some remediation for this. You're going to want to try to get a retrade for that. Small things, I'll tell you right now, don't nickel and dime sellers. People get annoyed by that and they won't sell you another deal. So, you're like, we got a light bulb out in the hallway and, there was a broken, switch or broken toilet in unit 1B, come on, you have turn costs that you should have underwritten for that. You should have had operating capital or reserves and Capex reserves for those types of things. Don't have your underwriting be so tight that you can't overcome some minor discrepancies like that. One item that may be a big deal is, and I've seen this happen, is fire units. You put it under contract, a fire occurred, it wasn't disclosed to you. You come and do your inspections, and all of a sudden you find out there's a non-rentable unit or a down unit. It wasn't on the rent roll because it was a down unit and you didn't know about it. You do your inspection, there's a burn unit. How am I going to fix this? That's a lot of money. You're talking to renovate a standard apartment from the bones up is $60,000 to $70,000. So it's just what it's going to take, because you have, not only do you have construction, it's not like you're just building it new. You got a demo, you got to mitigate smoke damage, different things like that. So it's going to be very, very expensive. So that's something you're going to want to retrade on. Or if they didn't disclose that there is aluminum wiring, and you get in there and there's aluminum wiring, and now your insurance premium is going to go up because they did not disclose that, that may be something that you're going to want to retrade on. But use your retrade card very, very carefully. Try not to retrade if possible. You are going to have a hard time retrading if you have a significant amount of hard money down, because they're like, well, I mean, you put hard money down because you said contingent on nothing. So tough luck. Yeah. Hopefully you're not dealing with someone that hard nosed, but you can be, or maybe there's a pandemic that occurs and interest rates jump a point and you can no longer purchase the deal for what you had underwritten to purchase it at because your sensitivities didn't include a 1 point jump or 100 basis jump. Okay. So that's where you're going to have to go and back to the seller and renegotiate. One word of advice that I'm going to tell you is communicate early and often. Don't wait. Don't hold off on those tough conversations. If you have a problem, immediately have that conversation. Immediately. Don't wait a week. Don't just stop communication. They're going to know something's wrong and it's just going to bite you in the end. So the saying goes, pain is inevitable, but misery is avoidable. And the longer you put something off, the worse the misery is going to be. So make sure you take care of that. Let me look at my questions right quick. Okay, we have a question about the from Gene Allen about due diligence. Why don't you email me on that one, that question, because that's a little bit deeper probably than I can get into in this, but I would like to ask you a few questions about some issues you're having there with a contract. I'd be glad to do that. So my email is brandon@passiveinvesting.com. So Gene Allen, please email me that. And then retrading seems impossible if hard money day one. And again, that's what I mentioned, except for your big items. And it's really this is a relationship business. I mean, you do have people that, there's people in this business that I won't transact with again because they're very transactional, but this is a relationship business on all sides. With your lender, with your broker, with the seller, with the buyers. It's all around, and treat people like you want to be treated. And I promise you'll go far and you will make plenty of money for everybody. So treat people with respect and be honest and be candid, and do not be shysty and do not be greedy because you won't last very long at all. Let me just check this question here. All right. So the question is, if the prior landlord did any background and credit check, are you entitled to it? If they didn't do the credit and background check, can you ask the tenants to provide info to do the check during due diligence period? So they already have a signed lease. So if you don't have that information, you can request it, but you're going to have a hard time getting it or making them get it because they already have a signed lease. They don't have to provide you with anything. If there was already one done, yes, we are looking at the credit reports and the background checks for those. They're not always available. I will tell you that. They'll be like management approval manual, and there will be no paperwork in the file. So typically you have enough information there though to pull your own background checks if you need to. But yes, that is part of the lease audit, is to check backgrounds. Where do you draw the line between what you'll fix and what you want the owner to fix? Where do you draw the line between what you'll fix and what you want the owner to fix? We do have in our LOI, it's like we have like a $5,000 material change. That's really in financials. So there's a big change in financials. Like, you showed us a rent roll in a T12, and then we get the updated one and there's a significant difference in NOI, then, there's going to be a problem there. We're going to have to retrade that. But other than that, if, like I said, dollar amount is kind of hard. If it's over $5,000, I'm going to start looking at it a little bit closer. You start getting to $10,000, we're probably going to have an issue. Burn units and stuff like that are definitely going to be something that you're going to want to retrade. So anything I would say under $5,000, I would not sweat that. But if you have like a $5,000 issue in all the units, that's a whole different thing. So when I say 5,000, I mean in totality, the issue is a cost of $5,000. Then I would not less than $5,000. Then I would not retrade, if that makes sense. All right. I want to go ahead and check my chat then and see what we have going on here. How much of PCA does seller provide? How much of the PCA does the seller provide is the question. And the seller provides, they may give you their PCA, but I doubt it. You're just on your own. They're not going to disclose more than they have to. We do get their last phase one and title and survey from when they purchased the property, or if they had it done recently, we get the most updated one. Sometimes we'll ask for that while we're still negotiating LOI, just to make sure it's all in line, and they'll have a Dropbox folder and provide all that. Another thing that you're going to want to check for as well is assumable and non-assumable contracts. So when you take over a property, they are going to have a bunch of contracts. Let's say it's valet trash or pest control, waste management, laundry service, landscape service. I'm trying to just think through some different ones. Cable, bulk cable, revenue share, different things like that. Some of them you have to assume because they're like a 5-year contract, and some of them you do not have to assume because it's a year to year, or it's a month to month. Make sure you pay attention to that, because what can happen, let's say the seller knows they're getting ready to sell, so they go to Spectrum and they say, we want to sign a bulk cable agreement. A bulk cable agreement is an exclusivity, so like tenants have to use Spectrum or whoever the provider is on the property. And then you as the owner get a lump sum check, and it's significant, $70,000 or $100,000, depending on the size of the property. They could have done that right before you bought the property. They get all the money, you get nothing. You're stuck with that contract for 10 years. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to, any assumable, non-assumable contracts. And renegotiate where possible. Valet trash. We've had some properties where, they had a valet trash contract that was, had to be assumed. But we were getting it for less from the same company. So we just went to the company afterward and said, hey, look here, you're going to have to renegotiate this. Most of the time they're willing to do that because they want to, make sure that, they keep your business. Trash contracts. I believe the quote. So previously I mentioned that trash contracts seem to be going away. Is there any further info regarding that? I think you mean as far as like valet trash is concerned. If that's the case, if you want to clarify that, TK, that would be great. But if you're talking about valet trash, that is, it's not something that really can be counted on as a revenue source, is what I mean by that. I think people still like it. Are they willing to pay as much for it? It depends on your neighborhood, and depends on how many trash receptacles you have. So if you have dumpsters all across the property, it's not as big of a deal. If you have one compactor all the way in one corner, then it's a little bit bigger deal. If you have mid-rise or even a high-rise building, and the trash chutes at one end of the wing and they've got to haul it down the hallway, then that's maybe something that people want to pay convenience for. So it's still necessary. It's just not something we really count. We don't put it in our underwriting necessarily as like a big premium that we're going to boost revenue with. It's a little bit, but not quite as popular. So one thing that we are trying to find solutions for, looking for companies, is that a company that provides valet waste and also hauls the trash off site, instead of just putting it into our receptacles. Because we have a cost to rent dumpsters or to rent a compactor, and then we're paying another company just to get the trash from the tenants, put it into the trash receptacle. So if there's a company that owned a trash truck and they just went on site and grabbed all the trash, put it right into their trash truck and hauled it off, then I can get rid of dumpsters. It cleans up the property, it reduces costs, boosts NOI, which therefore boosts property valuation. So that. All right. And then due diligence, again, make sure that you're going over your CapEx plan with your contractors during the due diligence phase. Get everybody on board with the business plan. So, you want your property manager there, you want your contractors, you want your asset manager, if that's the case, whoever's going to be involved in implementing the business plan. Make sure that they're there during due diligence. Make sure that the plan is explained in a way that everybody's on the same page, so there's no question, so that when day one, hit the ground running, we all have a plan, we all know what to do, and there's not a bunch of scrambling and running around with chickens with your head cut off. So that is a basic rundown of due diligence. I'll give a couple seconds here for any additional questions while we wrap up. I'm not sure of that question, Frenchie. You might have to clarify that for me. So, all right. Any other questions? I'm going to see. And then next week, we have our Multifamily Investor Nation weekly webinar. We're going to be going over what to consider when you structure an apartment syndication. What type of entity should you use when setting up your syndication? What are the different types of entity splits and preferred returns to consider? How do waterfall and hurdles impact the overall returns for LPs and GPs in the deal? How is the IRR different from the ROI? And obviously, as always, so much more. We like to expound on, as much as we can. So be sure to join us next week on the weekly webinar. Dan Handford will be the host. Thank you for joining us this week, and be sure to sign up for the Multifamily Investor Nation Summit in June, and we will see you next time. I appreciate you joining us.